Hey, now you're looking inside one of the most famous homes in American history, American television history, we should say. A certain little triplex in Minneapolis.
That, of course, was Mary Tyler Moore's house from the Mary Richards house.
Mary Richards' house.
Tyler Moore.
She has another name than Mary Richards?
Yes, and of course she was joined there by her friends,
right.
Phyllis and Rhoda, who also lived in the same building.
Right.
There we go. There's the floor plan
this
of the
is,
house.
Oh,
there we go. You go
those are the
walk
stairs
down
to
the
Phyllis's,
stairs to
right?
house, and upstairs
to Rhoda's
house. That was Mary's best
Rhoda
friend.
Morgenstern, Phyllis Lindstrom. There for the trivia bus out there. Not
and
bad, huh?
Lars, wasn't that her husband?
That's, hey!
Pretty
See, you're
scary.
into this. Well, if you're into these kind of questions, and they're not too quirky for you, there's a new book out called TV Sets. Not the kind you watch, but the TV sets that are done, the shows are done on. They are fictional floor plans that are carefully researched blueprints of these make-believe houses.
Now, ABC's Brian Rooney tracked down the man behind this book, of obviously a devoted TV fan, who long ago made it his mission to figure out just where Mary went when she walked through her front door.
Mark Bennett works for the U.S. Postal Service in a zip code made famous by television. That's his living, delivering mail to the perfect houses of Beverly Hills. But his obsession is the ideal homes of Hollywood, homes that millions of Americans have seen, even if they never really existed. Homes like the one where Ward and June Cleaver lived.
This is when Wally and Beaver were fairly young.
Lucy and Ricky's apartment.
They first started in apartment 4A at 623 East 68th Street.
The town of Mayberry.
If you turn right on Elm Street, you would pass by the home of Barney Fife. He had a room in Mrs. Mendelbright's apartment house.
Bennett escaped an unhappy childhood by immersing himself in the fictional world of television, back in the days when there was no problem that couldn't be solved in 30 minutes. He took detailed notes and turned them into blueprints of homes. Blueprints for happy living. What was the first blueprint you did?
Leave it to Beaver. The Pine Avenue house, not the Grant Avenue house. They moved, you know.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, they did. They moved networks and they moved from Grant to Pine.
As blueprints, they were interesting, but as art, they were unnoticed, until one day a dealer saw them on display in a restaurant.
My eye traveled to one of the blueprints, and at the bottom it said, Home of Mary Richards. And I went, wait a minute, I know Mary Richards.
Mary, I just love your apartment. Well, you've been here before.
Millions of Americans know Mary Richards. They remember the honeymooners, Donna Reed. The blueprints set off reactions almost like family memories. Father knows best.
Remember the time the hot water heater broke? And Jim had to cancel his camping trip because Margaret couldn't fix it.
Now Mark Bennett's blueprints are in a gallery with a price tag of $3,000. They've been published in a book called TV Sets. And this summer, they will hang in the Corcoran Gallery in Washington, next to the American landscapes and busts of famous dead men.
It's very similar, I think, in some ways to what an artist like Andy Warhol did with soup cans.
I wanted these people to be real. And to me, drawing them and getting their addresses and their phone numbers and their license plates numbers and what kind of car they drove and what kind of clothes they wore, it was important to me.
He watched television for hours, for days, for years, until the happy families of television were his. He knew where little Ricky's crib was, where Wally and Beaver sat at the dinner table, and more.
Did you think growing up that you were going to have a house in New Rochelle on one income, you know, with a beautiful wife in capri pants?
Mark Bennett grew up to learn that life was not like television. His dream of being an artist was overtaken by the reality that he was a mailman. Until one day, his fascination with television allowed him to make it after all. Brian Rooney for Good Morning America, Sunday.